I'm 40 years old and just recently some things weren't feeling quite right in my body. Despite taking care of myself, eating whole foods, exercising, plenty of relaxation and doing all of the right things, I was experiencing intense fatigue, headaches and some other things. After seeing a video of Eddie Hall having his blood analysed, I decided to give it a go to see what it was all about and was interested to find out what would come up in my blood test. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the full process, showing my surprising results, along with the action plan I've been given to improve my health and well-being. This is Phil Richards, a clinical nutritionist. Phil is going to investigate my blood and also to check for things like vitamins, minerals, hormones, gut biome, parasites, bacteria, fungus, check the health of my organs to see how healthy I am. I did 2 tests, a blood test and a stool test, and together these will measure over 200 things. For the blood test, I had to find a phlebotomist, someone to take my blood, with a centrifuge, and this was quite easy as the booking process came with a list of recommended people. I visited a lady local to me, then sent the blood off to the lab on next day delivery. As part of this test, I filled out 2 questionnaires, and the first one was a health questionnaire and it covered all aspects of my life, and the second was a food diary listing everything that I ate and drank in 1 week. The stool test had 5 tests, I think, and it was all done in one go. The results took about 4 weeks and they were sent straight to Phil for a full analysis. Before I talk you through my results, which some of them, I'll be honest, were just such a surprise to me, I really want to tell you exactly why I had these tests. For several months I'd been experiencing intense fatigue to the point where sometimes I was going to bed at 6:30 p.m. because I just couldn't function, both physically and mentally. I'd sleep for 10 hours at a time, sometimes more, and still wake up feeling just as bad. I'd ask myself, was I working too hard, or was this just something that happened as part of getting older? I was also getting brain fog, where as the day went on, my concentration and focus would take a steep decline, but I'd push through just because if I gave into it, I'd just end up in bed for 12 hours. And this is a good point to say that I was getting 8 to 9 hours of decent sleep a night. I was exercising, getting morning light, eating whole foods. I was sugar and alcohol free and taking lots of relax time. I was doing all of the right things, but the way I was feeling, it was unacceptable because it was starting to have a negative impact on my work and my social life, and I just knew that something wasn't right. After intentionally gaining 10 kilograms of body weight for a challenge last year, I was struggling to lose the final 4 kilograms. And to some, I may not look overweight, but a recent scientific body composition test showed that I had high body fat and low muscle mass. This is otherwise known as skinny fat. The test was showing that I was 300 grams metre squared of muscle away from being malnourished. Malnourished. I never would have associated that word with myself, but that's what the test was showing, and just you wait. I've had irregular periods for such a long time now, and I think it was to do with being on the contraceptive pill for about 6 years. And finally, after being off it for so many years, I'm becoming more regular again, but my PMT is dreadful, and I used to think that PMT was just an excuse, but now I totally get it. And 2 days before my period, it's as though someone is winding up an elastic band inside me.
And I could literally explode.
And then I just feel so emotional as well. I just thought maybe it was a habit that I'd got myself into, and that often I would try and stoic myself out of it. Just wait. I've been tracking my body composition for almost 3 years, and recently my muscle mass and bone density has taken a steep decline. And when I refer to these things like body fat and muscle, this isn't about the way that my body looks, or even about the way that it performs. This is me thinking about my long-term health. I'd had a headache almost every day for 4 months. Yes, I spend a lot of time at the computer, but I take plenty of breaks and wear glasses with an up-to-date prescription. The headaches were causing me to miss social events with my friends, and sometimes they'd leave me in bed for a day at a time. And basically, it was just unacceptable that I was feeling like that. I'll be honest, I feel a bit embarrassed to be giving you this list of things that I was feeling, given that I make videos about living a healthy life, but that's the reality of how it was. And none of this was so bad that I couldn't get on with my life, but it was all just in the background, just being a nuisance to me and using up so much of my energy. If you've seen my 7-day fast video, you may have seen that I've had some stomach issues in the past. Constant burping and small stomach cramps, a kind of pinching feeling. And I was wondering, did I have something weird living in my stomach? And I was always hungry. Even after eating a full meal, I was full up and yet I still felt hungry. What's that all about? Some people in the comments of that video suggested that I might have had a parasite, a stomach ulcer, or Helicobacter pylori. These tests would soon tell me if I had any of those. And this next one, it's kind of personal, but well, we're just going for it here. For a very long time, as in years, I've suffered with CANDIDA, which is a yeast infection. And honestly, it drives me mad. It really gets me down actually, because I do all of the right things not to have it, but it's just always there. I kind of convinced myself that I had an overgrowth of CANDIDA throughout my body and it was causing me all of these issues that I've already mentioned, and these tests would finally tell me if I did have it. And then just one more thing, the list goes on. For many years I've suffered with depression, and on 4 occasions I've had it so bad, but thankfully I haven't had it in a long time now. But I've always got this idea that it's kind of lurking in the background, and I wonder to myself, is it an environment thing, or is it an upbringing, circumstantial? Maybe it's a habit that I've got myself into with my mindset, or could it be hormones, nutrition? And with this depression, I'm not sure if they're linked, but I get anxiety. And recently I've experienced social awkwardness and paranoia, where I don't really feel relaxed in other people's company. And I couldn't work out where this feeling was coming from, because I've always been an outgoing and a confident person. And I was wondering, could this be an imbalance in my body? So if you haven't already guessed it, for the past 6 months, then I haven't been feeling great. I haven't been feeling terrible, but I've just felt not good. Just this constant state of feeling slightly on edge and just always tired. I had a series of blood tests with my doctor, which all came back normal, and I started to wonder if this was all in my mind, especially when I spoke to some people about it, and they said, well,
you're getting old now,
or
you work too hard.
But I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't know what. This video is part of a series exploring my health and my fitness, both body and mind. So be sure to watch the other videos that are related to this, as they all fit together. Let's head into the test results and really see what's going on here. For the purpose of this video, Phil met me in person to talk through my test results, all 200 of them, telling me what each one did in the body and how the level was affecting me. And this video is quite extensive, so if you've got any questions at any point, just put them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them.
We're going to go through a very comprehensive blood panel, and we're going to start first of all with the red blood cell indexes. So we're going to look at your red blood cell count, and the only thing that I'm really picking up on your red blood cells is the size of your red blood cells. They're slightly enlarged. There can be a couple of causes because of that, but in your case it's because of a folate deficiency. So we need, and we've seen on your blood result that you're very low in folate. Okay, so we need to just bring that into the supplementation and also into your diet. The red blood cells are carrying plenty of oxygen. You've got no iron deficiencies there. And then when we go down to the white blood cells, we're then looking at the only thing that's really standing on that is at the particular time you had your blood test, you had high levels of neutrophils. In this case, that is just indicative of some sort of bacterial infection that was going on there, but nothing of any concern. Okay, and as we come down the panel, then we start looking at things like hemoglobin A1C. There's also sort of glucose fasting levels, insulin, C-peptide, fructosamine. So obviously these are all markers of blood sugar regulation. How well have you done on carbohydrate metabolism over the last couple of months, over a 3-month period? And you've done really well. So you've got no signs of insulin resistance, you've got no sign of diabetes, and you do well, as I said, on sort of blood sugar regulation. Then as we come further down, We look at a number of markers to do with cholesterol and triglycerides, and thankfully the cholesterol levels are very good. I always worry more when I see low cholesterol than when I see elevated cholesterol. I always see that in all the sick people that I test. And also cholesterol is only really problematic from a heart disease perspective when you see lots of inflammation in your blood vessel walls, and you're not seeing that on the particular markers, which we'll cover very shortly. And then when we looked at your liver and your gallbladder, so there's certain markers there where we look at things like ALT and GGT, and they can give us a good indication on gallbladder function, especially things like bilirubin. Like your liver is very, very healthy, your gallbladder is healthy, and also the marker called GGT, gamma glutamyl transferase, is a marker. It's an alcohol marker. It can be indicated if you consume too much alcohol, but the primary marker that tells us is, are you producing enough glutathione? And glutathione is the most produced endogenous antioxidant we produce, so it's very important for the immune system, and your levels are exceptional. You normally see that level very high on people who are not well. And then when we start to look at things like your protein, your total protein intake, which is the summation of globulin and albumin, which are the most abundant proteins in the bloodstream, the only thing that's standing out on those particular markers is that you're low in globulin. The clinical manifestations of that is usually, it can indicate digestive inflammation and also malnutrition. And in your case, I believe it's more malnutrition. You know, you're low in certain nutrients and protein, which we're going to speak about shortly. All your electrolytes are very low, so you were low in sodium, potassium, chloride, magnesium and calcium. And
I can't believe that my electrolytes are low.
Well, and as we said, I think when I looked at your nutritional diary, then I could make, I could see what I believe is the causation of that, and that was you're obviously fasting for long periods of time. You're not having your first meal till midday. You're sort of having ginger, and what else is in that? Ginger and
turmeric, green tea.
Yeah, there's just not enough. The body is in a state of catabolism. So you're breaking down. And then when we looked at, which we just about to come on to in the same area, when you looked at your urea levels and your creatinine levels, which are protein, an indication on how much protein you're consuming, as well as kidney markers as well. But in your case, you're very low in electrolytes and you're very low in protein. So that's why I believe the globulin was low, because it's a sign of malnutrition. You need a lot more protein in your diet, and you need a lot more state in the obvious of electrolytes, which you're going to get obviously via the diet, and also in your case the absolute need for supplementation to get those levels back, because I said you're so low in particularly magnesium. You're not going to get that just from diet alone, not today. So you're going to need sort of high level supplementation of magnesium.
I never would have thought that I would have kind of come under the category of malnutrition.
Yeah.
Like, that's quite shocking.
Yeah.
And is that leading to some of the ways that I'm feeling, like the tiredness, the lack of cognitive function, all of those things that I listed?
Yeah, you're definitely going to get lethargy. You're going to get sort of brain fog, etc. But you're also going to get you're going to start to get what is known as sarcopenia as well, which is obviously muscle wastage. You're going to be adding, especially with the magnesium and the calcium and the vitamin D deficiency that you're in as well. Eventually that's not going to, so you're going to have the double whammy really, where you're going to have the sarcopenia and also the osteoporosis, and especially as you start, thankfully you're the right side of the menopause at the moment, but when you start going through the menopause, when the estrogen and the progesterone, the testosterone get low, with low minerals, especially the calcium, magnesium and vitamin D in particular, then you're going to start to degenerate much quicker than what you need to, and that's why you're also feeling malaise and just tired, etc. And we'll get into some other reasons why, what I've noted on what is also driving that as well. Yeah, it's very rare, as I said, you don't often see all the electrolytes. Well, I haven't in the several years that I've been doing blood chemistry, and that's where you see all the electrolytes. That can also, sodium and potassium deficiency can also be a sign also of adrenal insufficiency as well. And there's something known as the sodium potassium pump, which uses a lot of energy. You're low in those sort of nutrients. You're gonna feel very, very lethargic. What's also interesting, as we come down, then we look at things like there's a marker called creatine kinase, which can be a marker of muscle tissue breakdown. It can also be heart tissue breakdown as well. But in your case, what that marker is telling me is that the exercise that you're doing is all yin. There's no yang in there. So you do the Pilates, etc. That's great if it was alongside a very sort of well-structured strength training program. So your creatinine levels are low, your urea levels low. The creatinine levels is a sign of muscle wastage as well, the protein. And then when you look at the creatine kinase, you can see that that there is no physical activity which is challenging your muscles.
Oh, really? You can tell that from those numbers?
Yeah, from this creatine kinase marker there. So yeah, I mean, you're well below even what would be known as the standard level, which you're not even.
And I consider myself as fit.
Yeah.
But that's coming up as.
It's not so much that
really.
you're not fit. What you're not doing, you're not challenging your musculoskeletal system enough, and whatever you're doing, your body is so used to it, it's not responding. So that's why I'm a massive advocate of strength training / hypertrophy training, which is obviously building muscle tissue. As we come further down this chart, then, because what I should have added as well with when you're very low in chloride as well, which is also essential for hydrochloric acid, I would recommend for a short period of time that you take an HCl, hydrochloric acid, and pepsin, which will help you to digest protein more. Because when you eat, if you have a meal now, say with a steak, which is about, say we say a 10-ounce steak, which will give you about 40-50 grams of protein, that might sit in your gut for a long time, because HCl is crucial for the digestion of that protein. Okay.
Interesting. So that would be the reason that if I do ever eat a meat-heavy meal, I just feel as though it just sits there for ages.
Yeah, and that's the good thing. What we've done with you as well is, we've looked at your stool sample as well, which will tell me the health of your pancreas. So it could either be pancreatic insufficiency, which is leading then to low levels of an enzyme called protease, which is also essential for protein breakdown. But that's not the case if your pancreas is really healthy. So in your case, the reason why that meat is sitting there is because you've got low HCl. Now that could be caused not just from having low, because you need chloride, you need zinc, and you need something called thiamine. And actually, when you've got an iron gap, which you have as well, that can also be an indication of thiamine deficiency, which can also give us a bigger case for HCl. And the other cause of HCl deficiency is not just having these low nutrients, which is the chloride, the zinc, and the thiamine. Your zinc is fine, so with you it's chlorine, thiamine, but it can also be Helicobacter pylori. So a lot of people in the UK, for example, 40% of the population, according to the research, have got Helicobacter pylori, which is a bacterium which will eat away at the stomach wall, and in the stomach wall there's something called parotial cells, and those cells will release HCl. But they also will eat away something called intrinsic factor as well, and that is a transporter for B12. So a lot of people can have very low B12 levels as well, and not necessarily because they're vegan, it's because they can't absorb the actual B12 itself. So there's a number of reasons, but we've looked at your Helicobacter pylori, it's very good. So some other interesting markers on you as well. So we looked at like your C-reactive protein and something known as high sensitivity C-reactive protein, which is more of a marker of blood vessel wall inflammation. These are big markers of inflammation. The CRP is more like a satellite marker, and your inflammation levels are very, very low. And I think one of the reasons of that, we also looked at your fatty acid profile, and your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is very, very good. You've got optimal levels of omega-3s, and we just need to lower your omega-6s a little bit, but it's still exceptionally good. On the thyroid, your TSH marker, which is thyroid stimulated hormone, which is a hormone which is released by the pituitary gland, trying to wake up your thyroid to produce T4 and T3. There's lots of factors which can interfere with that process. It's got a high need for nutrients that needs to be, especially like selenium and iodine. Actually, iron plays a big role in that area as well. But your selenium levels are very good. Your iron levels are very good. Your TSH levels are struggling a bit, so I would say maybe that you need a bit of assistance from some extra iodine. Okay, so you are starting to move towards hypothyroidism, but you're not quite there yet. You don't need medical intervention on that. And then as we come down then, so we did your blood work mid-cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why we can see a significant surge in luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone is stimulating the follicle to release the egg. The only other time you will see LH levels that high is in a menopausal woman. In your case, it can also be indicative as well in a female who's still menstruating if she's got ovarian insufficiency, but that's not the case with you because your follicle stimulating hormone is very good.
Okay.
That would also be elevated as well. And then when we look at your progesterone and your estradiol levels, your progesterone levels are going to be fairly low during that middle part as they start to climb, but they're a bit lower than what I would like to see. So there's a number of factors that we can increase your progesterone levels, which we'll talk on the nutritional consultation. But actually, as a side note, vitamin C is actually very good as a natural alternative to increasing progesterone.
Yeah.
Your estrogen levels, so your ratio at that particular time, there's a ratio of progesterone to estrogen, a real healthy ratio, that's what you've got to know, but that would be tested probably around maybe day 21 or whatever, is around 200 to 501 progesterone to estrogen ratio. You was at the moment during this stage is 5:1, so I would still say that you're still more estrogen dominance, but not massively estrogen dominant. Actually, your estrogen levels, just as a side note, this is one of the healthiest estrogen levels I've seen in a lot of women, no matter whether they're menopausal or not. You're normally seeing I thought I would see before I started doing blood chemistry analysis, there's a term out there called estrogen dominance, and it's definitely a factor. So I was thinking that a lot of women were going to be going to see very high estrogen levels. I didn't really see that. I've just seen very low. And as a side note, when the estrogen levels are low in a female, you will struggle massively to gain muscle tissue.
Yeah.
Estrogen will stimulate something in the muscles called muscle satellite cells. In males, testosterone really plays that role. But also, as the lower you become in estrogen, the more abdominal fat you start to accumulate. And it's really difficult to get in shape. That's why hormones really are the key to optimum body fat composition for fat loss. You've got to get them on your side, and they work in like a sympathy, where you're in the orchestra and all the hormones need, they've got to play in tune. If estrogen is really high, it can increase something called thyroid binding globulin, which will bind the thyroid hormone. If progesterone is really low, it can turn off thyroid hormone receptors. So it's all like there's this huge interconnection.
All interwoven.
Yeah.
And I've got high estrogen.
You got good estrogen. It's slightly elevated, but it's not like excessive. So I'm not really gonna really focus too much on it. You're somebody that will respond really good to strength training.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, once we've sorted you starting to eat more protein, get the electrolytes back up, because magnesium, I should say as well, is very, very important for insulin sensitivity, which is insulin is one of the primary anabolic hormones. Even the nutrients are playing a big part, and how the hormones function. Nothing works singly. When you look at the blood work and you look at the stool, you're looking at the whole of the organism, and you're trying to turn red flags into green flags. And the more green flags you got, then obviously the healthier the organism is. And from a training perspective, the more you respond to training. Your testosterone levels are very good. So, like your profile, if you weren't very well skilled in blood chemistry analysis, it could look like a PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome profile. But then the insulin levels are usually very high, sex hormone binding globulin levels are very low. None of that's happening in your case, right. So I don't believe that is the case with you. So there's other markers then, like homocysteine, which is a marker. It's a great marker for methylation. Homocysteine can, if it's elevated. It's also a sign of B12 and folate deficiency. There's also something called the MTHFR gene mutation, which is quite common, unfortunately. What that means is you struggle with methylation and you usually see homocysteine levels elevated. That's not the case with you. You're a very good methylator, which means you also will detoxify very efficiently.
Do you think that has something to do with me eating all my vegetables and whole foods?
I'd say more to do with your genes on that one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I don't often say that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't often say, because genes, as you know, genes are very malleable. You know, it's not like there's certain genetic traits we all have. But really, the genes are really listening to the environment. You know, as we know. So it's the epigenetic. So food, emotions, toxins can have a significant effect on turning, to switch on the gene to do a certain function. In your case, I do believe that's genetics. Then when we look at your vitamin D levels, even though you are taking vitamin D supplementation, you are very, very low. I mean, the optimum ratio on that is between 50 and 90 nanograms per milliliter. You're down to 22. There's a number of considerations you've got to take when you consume vitamin D. Magnesium is absolutely essential for vitamin D metabolism. So there's 8 steps to convert inactive vitamin D into active vitamin D, and every single step is totally reliant on magnesium. So the higher you can get your magnesium levels as well, you actually increase vitamin D levels, right, as a side note. But in your case, I would probably recommend, as we all know now, which I was recommending a number of years ago, you've got to take vitamin K2 with vitamin D. And the reason for that is, and also magnesium plays a big role here, is that vitamin D can help the body super absorb calcium. What the K2 does, it sends it to the bone, and that's where you want it, because if the calcium starts building up in the tissues and in the coronary arteries, you're going to have huge problems. So there's something known as the coronary artery calcium scan, which is one of the most predictive scans whether you're going to have heart disease or not. And it's on a score, and I actually had mine done about 3 years ago. And if you've got a lot of calcium in there, you're in big problems, And if that score is over 1,000, it's not looking good. So they score it between 0 up to 1,000 and like over 400. There's calcification there. Thankfully, mine was 0. I don't know how that was the case, but I do have an associate whose levels are over 3,500, and also then ended up on a quadruple bypass literally days after finding that out. So it's that predictive. But vitamin D K2 is so important. K2 can actually help to ensure, as I said, that calcium. So never take, even though your calcium levels are low, never take a calcium supplement. Okay, it's one of the worst things you can do. You're going to get plenty of calcium from your diet, and it's the magnesium and the vitamin K2 and the vitamin D which would start to send that back to where it needs to go, which is to the bones. You'll see that your zinc levels are elevated because we've looked at your red blood cell zinc as well, which I'll show in a second. So something that people need to look out for is that when zinc levels in supplements are really high and copper levels are really low, over a period of time, you can end up having a chronic copper deficiency, which can lead on to an anemic problem, because copper is essential for carrying iron into the bone marrow, etc. So supplementation can be, it can also cause some major problems if you don't know. So for example, you don't need iron, your ferritin levels are in the optimum range. So you don't need a supplement, a multivitamin and mineral with because you're feeling, lethargic type. You might think, a lot of people say, oh, well, that's got to be iron. But very rarely do I ever see people with low iron levels. Your cortisol levels they slightly below what would be classed as optimum, and so is your DHEA levels. So the DHEA is dihydroepiandrosterone, which is the most abundant steroid in the body, and it's almost known as an anti-stress hormone, where the cortisol is known as a stress. They literally have a yin and yang as well, and your DHEA levels is below optimum, and so is your cortisol. So I would class that as very, very slight adrenal insufficiency, where actually, do you need any assistance there? Not really. There's, a lot of people will throw the word around. If I wasn't looking at your blood and you spoke to me 10 years ago, I'd say, well, it's probably your adrenals. Your adrenals are tired. In all the blood work I've done over several years, I've only seen 3 people with what would be classed as adrenals insufficiency, where they literally can't get up. You know, they're that exhausted. But it's very rare. I mean, I thought, again, I'd see a lot more of it. Your IGF-1 levels are very good. Well, I say very good, it'll get better. IGF-1 is insulin growth factor 1. So what happens when you release growth hormone, a certain amount of that growth hormone will function as growth hormone, but a lot of it goes to the liver and it gets converted into insulin growth factor 1. Again, it's a very anabolic sort of hormone. So again, when you look at the blood, so looking at your testosterone levels, your estrogen levels, your sort of IGF-1 levels. So I know as a trainer, if I'm training you and we get your protein intake up properly and we get the electrolyte levels up, you are going to have a much greater response to training. A lot of reasons why people don't respond to training today is that they've got chronic nutrient deficiencies, they've got chronic hormonal imbalances, and they've got a very high toxic load, you know, and they've got poor digestion as well, so their pancreas is poor. When people talk about certain, you know, like the most effective way to shift body fat and gain lean muscle tissue, from a body fat perspective, the only organ in the body that determines how much weight you carry in is your brain. And one of the primary hormones, there are a number of hormones that are linked with it, but the primary hormone is leptin. So leptin is known as an adipocytokine, but it's a hormone that's released by the fat cells that should signal to the brain, look, you know, from an appetite perspective, you've eaten enough food, whatever, you know, this lower the appetite, the speed your metabolism, so we don't store so much excess fat. When that signal starts to become distorted, which is what we have today, you hear a lot about insulin resistance, but you also get, if you've got insulin resistance, which you haven't got, you usually get leptin resistance. Well, I should add this as well, insulin also plays a huge role, not only in the amount of body fat you carry, but in the appetite centers in the brain as well. So if you've got blood sugar irregularities, and you've got leptin irregularities, you're going to start gaining weight, and you can lower the calories, but these hormones are so powerful, the urge to eat is just absolutely incredible. Leptin also is a big controller of your thyroid. So from a start, so when people go on a low calorie diet, the body will lower leptin levels, which then signals to the thyroid, look, we've got to turn you off. We can't have these thyroid hormones driving the metabolism, because as far as the body knows, it doesn't know there's a shop around the corner, your fridge is full of food. It thinks this is a code red. So it's going to switch down the metabolism. And not only does that, it also switches down all the reproductive hormones, because as far as the body's concerned as well, this isn't time for nookie. This is, you're hungry.
Doesn't know where it's going to get its next meal.
Testosterone levels start to decline in particular, thyroid levels, so your whole metabolic rate is starting to slow down. Now what's interesting with you as well, we looked at something called ghrelin. We did look at adiponectin.
And that leptin, is it high or low for me?
That's good. That's
good.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And in your case, because the protein was so low as well, what research has clearly shown as well, when protein is low in the diet, the appetite is going to be exceptionally ramped up, because from an evolution perspective, again, we need the protein. We need that protein. So there's a certain amount of protein that we will constantly chase before the appetite starts to switch down. And as I said, because you were doing this fast every morning, you know, and you've done that for a number of years, you know, not only was your protein really low, but when the results come through and I saw your ghrelin levels, you know, which ghrelin, as we know, is known as a hunger hormone, but it's much more important than that, okay? When ghrelin is elevated, which it is in you, and it's really high, and when I saw your eating habits, I wasn't surprised, because that's...
And I am always hungry, even when I'm full up.
So ghrelin, not only does it stimulate hunger, but it's really interesting when I was doing my research. Ghrelin will also increase something called lipoprotein lipase, which is an enzyme which will improve your ability to store fat. So if you think about it, again, from an evolution perspective, the body's thinking, I'm starving. Okay, so I've got to make sure when you break your fast, that I can store fat as quickly as we can, because we don't know when this is going to happen again. So it upregulates this enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, and you become much more efficient at storing fat when you start eating what the body would perceive as a normal sort of way of eating. So
and I usually go for a bowl of porridge.
Which then, as you know, then is going to create more of an issue, because there's no protein in the porridge, or not enough really to have any significant effect. So the appetite centre's still saying, look, where's the protein?
And I'm still bloody starving.
And you will be starving, So what the research has shown, one of the best ways to get ghrelin levels back to, because even with bodybuilders, they've shown that when bodybuilders prepare for a bodybuilding competition over a period of time, and they've done studies on it was a 6-month period in this particular study. The ghrelin levels increased by over 40%, and they were at that level even for about a year later. So and the body becomes, and also thyroid will do the same. When the body perceives there's not enough nutrients and not enough sort of calorie density foods within the diet, then it's got to switch the thyroid off, because that thyroid, otherwise we're going to become so broken down, so catabolic, so it's got to, and the thyroid can stay switched off for years after. So you have now signaled to your physiology to become very effective at storing fat, and as the longer you had stayed on your regime, so you were going to become skinny fat. That's where you were going. And as I said, you're lucky that you're not in that menopausal phase yet, because then the acceleration just goes on.
Oh, don't even do it to me. How elevated was my ghrelin in terms of normal?
No, you're about you're well over 70 to 80% above what normal really is. And then what we also saw, so as I said, from a hormonal perspective, you were, it was a bit of a, even though I'm repeating it was a bit of a yin and yang. Your yang was like the anabolic hormones were really good, like the estrogen, the testosterone, etc. But as I said, through the way then that you were obviously eating and the way you're going, you were then creating your fatabolic hormones, your fat storage hormones to become also. So there would have been a big battle going on, but eventually I can tell you now the fat storing hormones were going to win that game. Yeah, there's absolutely no doubt about it. And then when we looked at your sort of stool panel, that gave us some incredible information, I should say, on, as I said, not only you haven't got Helicobacter pylori, as I said, over 40% of the UK population have got, even though I haven't seen that, if I'm honest, in all the stool work I've done over the years, I don't really see it. So I just haven't. I've seen it. I mean, I had a guy last week, his levels were really high, but I haven't seen one for months before that. But there's certain markers on yours. So there's something called beta defensin 2 and secretory immunoglobulin A. They are, what I want people to understand is over 80% of our immune system is housed in our gastrointestinal tract. It's our barrier defense. So it's a bit like a moat around the castle. The more effective the barrier defense are, so when there's a virus trying to get into the system, if the barrier defense is very effective, it's going to get caught up usually in the moat of the castle that's going around there. Yours is exceptionally good. Then we look at something called calprotectin, which is a marker of inflammation in the bowel. It's actually released by neutrophils that are there, like the first line of defense. You can, if you've got IBS, IBD, sort of Crohn's or colon cancer, this marker will be exceptional. There's no inflammation in your bowels, so that's really good. Your immune system, And then when we get to things like the ability for digestion, so the only thing that's holding you up, I said, it was the HCl, the hydrochloric acid, because your pancreas is very effective. There's something called pancreatic elastase. And very often I see that very low in people. And what that means is there's an inefficiency, because the pancreas releases enzymes not just to break down foods, but it also releases enzymes to break down viruses, to break down cancer cells. So it's a very important marker. And again, if you want to build lean muscle tissue and you want to get leaner, you need a very effective digestive system. So these markers really say, look, it's all well and dandy. We're going to change our diet. We're going to take these supplements. But if you can't digest, absorb, and assimilate, and also eliminate, which is a big thing as well, which on one of the markers there, you're eliminating really efficiently. You're detoxing via the bowels. The pancreas is working really efficiently. And also there's something called zonulin as well. And the zonulin is a marker which hasn't long been discovered. I think it's about 20 odd years or whatever. But zonulin is a marker of intestinal permeability, also known as leaky gut, okay? And there are certain factors that will stimulate zonulin. So gluten is one of those factors. So when you consume gluten can stimulate zonulin, which can open up the gut barrier wall for a couple of hours. So it's not necessarily that you've got a gluten intolerance, but it can stimulate zonulin.
Does it do that in everyone?
In everyone, yeah. And also and it's also, zonulin is also linked to every autoimmune disease as well. So there's the same gene that produces zonulin that's linked to all the autoimmune diseases. So if you're very high in zonulin, there's a potentiation for things like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis as well, so Hashimoto's. So a lot of the autoimmune problems are really coming via the gut. So it's really important to heal the gut. And then the only other thing that we saw on yours as well is that you had a parasite that was elevated, which is common throughout the world. That is normally through water contamination or food contamination. And that particular parasite, which was called...
Can't believe it.
Yeah. Again, I see it on, I do see it out of 2 out of 10 people. It probably more in other countries. So it's Blastocytus hominis. And that parasite, it can be inert. It might not cause any functions. It can cause diarrhea, etc. There are antibiotics that can wipe it out, though I'm not a fan of antibiotics because antibiotics can wipe out a lot of the gut microbiome. But also clinical research has shown that garlic is also as effective as antibiotics without wiping out the gut microbiome. It's another reason why we have so much disease today, so many antibiotic prescriptions over many, many years.
Will that be doing me any harm?
No, not really. I think if we saw the other markers like the calprotectin, if that was really shown there's lots of inflammation, etc. But no, I wouldn't really be that concerned about it. But I would put garlic on your...
I love garlic anyway.
Yeah, so the conclusion really is we need to increase our electrolytes, especially the magnesium, the potassium, the sodium. That'll start to come in. Something I would probably advise you to do is when you drink water, the most natural salt in the world is actually Celtic sea salt, which is from the south of France, I believe, or is somewhere around there, Brittany, around that area. That is very, very high in electrolytes. So every time you drink a litre of water, and I'd strongly advise drinking reverse osmosis water, not tap water, I would put like a pinch of that in there, as well as the supplementation then that we're going to need as well, just to get your levels back up to optimum. Then we saw things like increasing the stomach acid. We saw things just sort of increasing your progesterone levels naturally as well. We saw that the thyroid hormone needs a little bit of assistance, and then things like vitamin D, absolutely, that needs to go up to another level. And then obviously the way you're eating is contributing to a lot of the electrolyte imbalances, and also then to the very low protein intake, and also that's increasing then the sort of ghrelin in particular. So I think just some very simplistic changes. I would advise strongly on you only need 3 meals a day, if I'm honest with you, but those meals need to have a real optimum amount of protein, which will be on your nutritional plan. The supplementation plan, I'm less is more. That's what I love about the blood and the stool work. You're not blindly taking a plethora of supplements thinking, well, I don't know if this is working, I don't know if that's working, blah.
And just like a generic thing that's designed for the average person.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So you'll only need what you need. That's a good thing. And get all these, as I said, the red flags back into the green flags, even though thankfully you didn't have any red flags. You had a couple of, what I call sort of amber flags that just needed shifting. The only red flags you probably had, if I'm honest with you, was the very low protein intake and the very, very low magnesium. I'd probably class them as the red, but thankfully very easy to rectify. But you should feel so much better in the coming weeks, and we'll combine that with a very proactive strength training program to build not only strength but obviously to build muscle tissue. We know that the higher the muscle mass of an individual as they age, along with the higher the strength of that person, the greater the likelihood that they're going to have longevity, but also quality of life. So it's not just even about aesthetics, it's about functionality as well.
Did the test do CANDIDA testing?
It does in this, I think.
Because I'm convinced I've got it.
You will get CANDIDA there, like CANDIDA. You haven't got it.
So why am I keep getting this bloody...
You getting thrush or something like that?
Oh my God, like you wouldn't believe.
That's your diet.
It drives me crazy.
Yeah, I guarantee you, again, and I don't use that word a lot, within about 6 weeks on the diet and the supplements, you will not have Candida.
Stop.
Yeah, that's
I've had it for about 16 years.
Yeah, there's too much sugar in your diet, and it's feeding the Candida. It's feeding it, but it's not picking it up. So it's more of it's not in the bowels. It's more probably in your urinary tract and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's really reassuring.
Yeah.
So in short, this is a list of all the things that weren't so great that came up on my tests. And then this is the list of the good stuff. And what am I going to do as a result of all of this? I'll be working with Phil for the next 12 months to get me back on track. Then I'll retest these 2 tests along with fitness and strength tests to see what improvements I can make to this 40-year-old body. And I will definitely be making a video about that. For the exercise schedule, Phil has put me on a strength training plan to increase my muscle mass and strength, which will then increase my bone density. And that will take me back into the healthy range, which will also decrease my risk of osteoporosis, which is a weakening of the bones, along with metabolic disease and injuries in my later years. The more I read and listen to experts in the field of health, the more I realise how important weight training is for the body, no matter what age or gender. In fact, weight training becomes more important as we get older, and even more important for women, as muscle mass and bone density decreases significantly after the menopause due to a decrease in hormones. And when I say weight training, I don't mean bodybuilding, I mean weight-bearing exercise. This form of exercise stresses the muscle and bone, causing the body to make more. It's quite a simple procedure, and I can't really believe that I haven't taken notice of this sooner. But then again, no one's ever really explained it to me. I'd never done the tests and also hadn't had that decrease in muscle before. So once I saw it on paper, I knew that I needed to do something about it. And the programme has blown my mind actually. I didn't think that I was going to enjoy it, but I really am. The results have been incredible in just 4 weeks. I'm also doing some absolute killer interval sessions, but I'll tell you all about it in another video. Next on the plan of action is supplements. For many years I've taken supplements, and now based on my test results, Phil has added some new stuff to the mix. I'm taking HCl, which is a stomach acid tablet to help me digest my food and get the nutrients from it, higher dose vitamin D, high dose magnesium. I'm now adding electrolytes to my water. I take an amino acid drink with creatine powder during my weight training sessions to help stimulate muscle growth. A super strong odourless garlic capsule to kill my parasite. My multivitamin has been replaced with one that doesn't have iron in because I don't need any more iron. And I'm using a progesterone gel to balance my hormones, hopefully making my cycle regular and stopping that wretched PMT. That's quite a bit of stuff, but since taking these, quite honestly, I felt like a new person, and I'd rather be taking these natural supplements rather than taking prescribed medicine. And most of the supplements are just from Amazon. They don't come from Phil or some special business where everything's super expensive. I just get them off Amazon, and most of them are really affordable. And then moving on to the meal plan, this was something that was quite a shock to me because it was something totally different to what I'd ever done before. And I will admit, I feel a bit nervous about putting this part in, only because so many people have different values and views and benefits about food. So after all that dilly-dallying, I'll explain. Phil has put me on a 90-day high protein meal plan, and my protein is coming from food, which is meat and fish. I'm not doing any protein powders or protein supplements or anything like that. And before this, I considered myself as a meat avoider. I would eat quite a lot of fish, but I would only eat meat maybe once a fortnight, maybe even sometimes once a month. I never really enjoyed eating it because when I did eat it, it would just sit in my stomach and felt as though it just wouldn't move for hours. Found it expensive to buy in the supermarkets. And then I was also conflicted by certain things that I would read. Now I'm on 3 meals a day with 40 grams of protein for each meal, and this has all been designed with my test results and my requirements in mind. So after this 90-day high protein plan, which by the way, I'm getting fantastic results, then I think the plan is going to change, and I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm sure I'll tell you in some future videos. I've also been doing sauna therapy to help turbo boost this plan, which I'll make a separate video about in the future. So I've been doing this plan with the exercise, supplements and the food for 6 weeks, and in that time I gained 3 kilograms of muscle. 3 kilograms, like pick something up that's 3 kilograms, that is a lot. I've also gained 200 grams of bone, blows my mind. And then fat wise, I lost 5.6%, which is almost 4 kilograms of fat. So even though my weight has stayed the same, inside my body is a lot healthier with less fat and more muscle. And beyond that, I just feel so much better. My energy has increased. I haven't had a single headache. And then I've just got this sustainable energy throughout the day with my concentration and my focus at work. It's massively improved. I haven't had any brain fog, and then at the same time I just feel kind of chill. It's weird because I'm managing stress better and I've got clearer thinking, and it's just like I can line up the dots, whereas before everything just felt like such a struggle. It's such a bizarre and subtle feeling, and it's all come from just a few simple changes. It really blows my mind. My dad's noticed a difference in me from just our phone conversations, and my mum's been so impressed with this transformation, let's call it, that she's been joining me for my high protein lunches each day, and she is loving it. And even she's going to have her bloods tested with Phil too, and I'm going to make a video about it, which I'm so looking forward to. And she's 77, and she said to me the other day, do you think I ought to start weight training? For those interested in the packages that Phil offers, then I've added a link to his website in the description. The packages are a decent amount of money, but for someone like me, who drives a 17-year-old car, doesn't drink alcohol or eat out at restaurants much, I don't have a Netflix or Sky, I can justify spending this money on myself, especially when I was feeling the way I was, and I've kind of seen this as an investment in my future health. But if you cannot or do not want to do something like this, then what are the alternatives? The main message is to exercise by lifting weight, no matter what age or gender, and that will help maintain and build muscle mass and bone density, which will then take care of us. And then perhaps there may be ways for you to adjust your meals to suit your requirements. It could be hard to determine what foods or supplements you need without a blood test, but could you introduce more vegetables, less sugar, more protein? Sometimes just a few changes can make a whole lot of difference. I can quite honestly say this was one of the best things I've ever done for this YouTube channel, alongside the Alexandra technique and the artist's way. Each one of these are totally different, but all serving different areas of my life. And it's like Phil said, it's the yin with the yang. There's so much more that I could have added to this video, but what I plan to do is make some videos over the next 12 months, just showing my progress and giving some more updates. I think for me, what this ultimately comes down to is giving life my best shot, because we get one chance at it, and we might as well get to the end and say, well, that was a jolly good journey. I gave it my best try, and I had a great time.
I can't get over how excited I am.